The stagecoach lurched to a violent stop in front of the dusty general store in Hangtown, California. And Isaac Armstrong knew immediately that something was terribly wrong when the driver started shouting for help before he even climbed down from his perch. It was late September in 1872, and the afternoon sun beat down mercilessly on the rough mining town that had seen better days since the gold rush fever had cooled. Isaac had been loading supplies into his wagon when the commotion started, and he turned to see the driver yanking open the coach door with unusual urgency. "Someone get the doctor. Got a woman in here burning up with fever." The driver's weathered face was creased with genuine concern as he reached inside to help a figure that seemed barely able to move on her own. Isaac dropped the sack of grain he had been holding and strode quickly across the rutted street, his boots kicking up small clouds of dust with each step. He reached the coach just as the driver was trying to support a young woman who looked like she might collapse at any moment. Her traveling dress was rumpled and stained with the evidence of a long, difficult journey, and even from several feet away, Isaac could see the unnatural flush of fever on her pale cheeks. Dark circles shadowed her eyes, and she swayed dangerously as her feet touched the ground. "Easy now, miss," the driver said, his voice gentler than Isaac had ever heard it. "We got you to Hangtown safe enough." The woman tried to speak, but her words came out as barely a whisper. "Please, is there someone named Isaac Armstrong? I was supposed to meet him here." "The letters. We had an arrangement." Isaac felt his heart drop into his stomach. This fevered, desperately ill woman was Natalie Harper, the mail-order bride he had been corresponding with for the past 6 months. He had sent her money for passage from Boston after their letters had grown increasingly warm and hopeful, after he had convinced himself that perhaps he could have a companion on his ranch, instead of spending the rest of his days alone with nothing but cattle and horses for company. But he had pictured their first meeting very differently than this, had imagined her stepping down fresh and healthy, ready to begin a new life together. "I am Isaac Armstrong," he said, moving forward quickly to take her other arm as she began to sag against the driver. Up close, the heat radiating from her body was alarming. "Miss Harper, you should not have traveled in this condition. Why did you not wait until you were well?" "Could not wait," she managed, her voice barely audible. "Already had the ticket. Landlady turning me out, had nowhere else to go." Her eyes, though glazed with fever, held a desperate pride that touched something deep in Isaac's chest. "I will be well soon. Just need a little rest." Before Isaac could respond, she went completely limp in their arms, unconscious from the fever that was clearly far more serious than a simple cold. The driver cursed under his breath, and several townspeople had gathered around, murmuring and offering unhelpful suggestions. "Doc Henderson is 3 towns over, tending to that logging accident," old Mrs. Patterson called from the general store porch. "Will not be back for at least a week." Isaac made his decision in an instant. "Help me get her to my wagon," he told the driver. "My ranch is only 5 miles out. I have a clean bed and supplies there. I will care for her myself." Mrs. Patterson clucked her tongue disapprovingly. "That is not proper, Isaac Armstrong. Unmarried woman staying at your ranch without a chaperone." "She will die if someone does not help her," Isaac said sharply, his patience for small-town gossip wearing thin. "And I intend to marry her as soon as she is well enough to stand before a preacher. So I would appreciate it if you would fetch me some fever medicine and herbs from your store instead of worrying about propriety." The older woman huffed but disappeared into the store, and Isaac carefully lifted Natalie's burning body into his arms. She was lighter than he expected, too light, as if she had not been eating properly for some time. Her head lolled against his shoulder, and he could feel the rapid, thready pulse in her neck. The driver retrieved her single battered trunk from the coach and loaded it into the back of Isaac's wagon alongside the supplies. "Poor thing looked poorly when she boarded in Sacramento," the driver said quietly. "Tried to tell her to rest up there, but she insisted on pushing through. Said someone was waiting for her." "Someone was," Isaac replied, settling Natalie as gently as possible on the wagon bed cushioned with empty grain sacks. "And I will make sure she recovers." Mrs. Patterson returned with a basket containing various bottles and herb bundles, along with some clean linen cloths. "Willow bark tea for the fever, and make sure you keep cool cloths on her forehead and wrists. If her fever does not break in 3 days, you need to send for the doctor no matter how far he is." Isaac nodded his thanks, paid for the items and his other supplies, then climbed onto the wagon seat. He drove carefully out of town, avoiding the worst of the ruts and holes in the road, constantly glancing back to check on Natalie's still form. The 5 miles to his ranch felt like 50, and by the time he pulled up in front of his modest but well-maintained ranch house, the sun was beginning its descent toward the horizon. The house was built of sturdy timber with a covered porch that wrapped around 2 sides, offering shade during the brutal summer months. Isaac had built it himself 4 years ago when he first claimed this land, and he had unconsciously made it larger than a single man needed, as if some part of him had always hoped to fill it with a family someday. Now, carrying Natalie's fevered body across the threshold, he felt the weight of responsibility settle onto his shoulders like a physical thing. He took her directly to his bedroom, the largest and most comfortable room in the house, and laid her carefully on the bed. Her fever seemed even higher now, and she was mumbling incoherently, lost in whatever fever dreams plagued her. Isaac quickly stripped off his work gloves and rolled up his sleeves, then went to work with an efficiency born of necessity. He had nursed sick cattle and horses, had even tended injured ranch hands, but this felt entirely different. This was a woman he had promised to marry, someone who had traveled 3,000 miles based on nothing but letters and hope. He built up the fire in the stove and set water to boil for the willow bark tea Mrs. Patterson had provided. While it heated, he returned to the bedroom with a basin of cool water and the cloths. Natalie was still wearing her traveling dress, and Isaac hesitated, keenly aware of the impropriety of the situation. But practicality won out over propriety. She needed to be more comfortable, and the heavy wool dress was only making her fever worse. Working with as much respect as possible, Isaac managed to remove her dress down to her chemise and petticoats, averting his eyes from anything more than absolutely necessary. Even through the modest undergarments, he could see how thin she had become. Her collarbones stood out sharply, and her wrists were delicate as bird bones. Whatever circumstances had driven her to answer his advertisement, they had not been kind ones. He bathed her face, neck, and arms with cool water, trying to bring down the fever that seemed to be consuming her from within. She stirred slightly at his touch, murmuring words he could not quite make out. Something about rent and cold and hunger. Isaac felt anger kindle in his chest at the thought of this woman suffering while he had been out here on his prosperous ranch, unaware of just how desperate her situation had been. The water began to boil, and Isaac quickly prepared the willow bark tea, letting it steep until it was a dark amber color. Getting Natalie to drink it while unconscious proved challenging, but he managed to prop her up against his shoulder and coax small sips past her dry, cracked lips. Most of it dribbled down her chin, but he persisted until he was satisfied she had gotten at least some of the medicine into her system. For the rest of the evening and long into the night, Isaac maintained his vigil at her bedside. He changed the cool cloths on her forehead every 20 minutes, bathed her arms and legs when her fever seemed to spike higher, and tried to get more tea and water into her whenever she seemed even slightly conscious. He had moved a chair next to the bed and sat there in the lamplight, watching the rapid rise and fall of her chest, monitoring every breath and every slight change in her condition. Around midnight, she began to shake violently, her teeth chattering despite the fever heat radiating from her skin. Isaac quickly piled extra blankets over her, then on impulse, lay down on top of the covers beside her, using his own body heat to warm her through the fabric. The shaking gradually subsided, and she turned toward him unconsciously, seeking warmth and comfort even in her fevered state. In the quiet darkness of the ranch house, with only the sound of the wind outside and Natalie's labored breathing, Isaac found himself studying her face properly for the first time. Even ravaged by illness, she was lovely in a delicate, refined way that spoke of good breeding and education. Her letters had revealed a keen intelligence and a gentle humor that had drawn him in over the months of correspondence. She had told him about her life as a teacher in Boston, about losing her parents to illness, and falling on hard times when her father's business partner had absconded with all the company funds. She had been honest about her reduced circumstances, about needing a new start somewhere far from the pity and gossip of her old life. Isaac had been equally honest in his letters, telling her about the ranch he had carved out of difficult land through sheer stubbornness and hard work. He had inherited a small amount of money from his own father and used it to buy this property, then spent years building it into something sustainable. He raised cattle and bred horses, and he had a reputation for fair dealing that brought him steady business. At 28, he was considered a good prospect in Hangtown, but he had no interest in any of the local women who had made their availability known. They seemed to want a man with money and status, not a true partnership. Natalie's letters had been different. She wrote about books and ideas, about wanting to be useful and to build something meaningful with her life. She had asked thoughtful questions about his work and his dreams for the future. She had made him laugh with her wry observations about Boston society and her misadventures as a teacher trying to corral unruly students. He had found himself looking forward to each letter with an eagerness that surprised him, had spent hours composing his replies by lamplight after long days of work. Now she was here, desperately ill, and all his careful plans for their courtship had been thrown aside. Instead of showing her around the ranch and the town, instead of proper chaperoned visits and getting to know each other in person, he was fighting to keep her alive. As dawn began to lighten the eastern sky, Natalie's fever seemed to climb even higher. She thrashed weakly against the pillows, crying out in delirium. Isaac held her still, speaking to her in low, soothing tones, though he had no idea if she could hear him. "You are safe now, Natalie. You are at the ranch and I am going to take care of you. You just need to fight this fever. You are strong enough. You traveled 3,000 miles. You can fight through this." Her eyes fluttered open briefly, unfocused and glassy with fever, but for just a moment they seemed to see him. "Isaac," the word was barely a breath. "Yes, I am here. You made it to Hangtown. You are safe now." "Sorry," she whispered. "Wanted to be pretty for you, wanted you to like me." Isaac felt something crack open in his chest. "I do like you. I liked you from your very first letter. Now hush and save your strength. We will have plenty of time to talk when you are well." She managed the ghost of a smile before slipping back into unconsciousness. Isaac continued his ministrations as the sun rose fully, painting the bedroom walls with golden light. He prepared more willow bark tea, changed the water in the basin countless times, and never left her side for more than a few minutes. By midday on the second day, he was exhausted but determined. He had sent word to his ranch hands, who worked the far pastures and lived in the bunkhouse a quarter-mile from the main house, that he would be unavailable for a few days, and they should handle everything without him. His foreman, a reliable man named Carlos, had simply nodded and told him to take care of his woman. They would manage the ranch. The second night was worse than the first. Natalie's fever spiked so high that Isaac genuinely feared she might not survive until morning. He stripped away all but the lightest sheet and bathed her entire body with cool water, no longer caring about propriety in the face of life and death. Her skin was so hot it seemed to burn his hands, and her breathing had become shallow and rapid. "Do not you dare die," he found himself saying fiercely as he worked. "Do not you dare come all this way just to leave me now. I waited all these months to meet you. I have plans for us, Natalie Harper. Plans for this ranch, for a life together. You have to fight." Whether it was the cooling baths, the medicine, or simple luck, something seemed to help. Around 3 in the morning, her fever finally broke. Isaac watched in relief as sweat began to bead on her forehead, her body's way of releasing the terrible heat that had held her captive. He gently blotted her face and changed her into one of his own clean nightshirts, which hung comically large on her small frame but was dry and comfortable. For the first time in 2 days, Isaac allowed himself to leave her bedside. He stumbled to the kitchen, suddenly aware of his own hunger and exhaustion. He forced himself to eat some bread and cold meat, drank deeply from the water pump, then splashed cold water on his face. When he returned to the bedroom, Natalie was still sleeping, but it was a natural sleep now rather than the terrifying unconsciousness of high fever. Her breathing was deeper and more regular, and when he touched her forehead, it was only slightly warm rather than burning. Isaac collapsed into the chair beside the bed and finally let himself sleep, his hand resting protectively on the mattress near hers. He woke several hours later to find pale morning light filtering through the curtains and Natalie's blue eyes watching him with confusion but blessed clarity. He sat up quickly, nearly knocking over the chair in his haste. "You are awake, truly awake." She tried to speak, but her voice came out as a croak. Isaac quickly poured a glass of water and helped her sit up enough to drink. She sipped gratefully, then cleared her throat. "How long have I been here?" Her voice was weak but rational, a vast improvement over the delirious mumbling of the past 2 days. 2.5 days since you arrived. Your fever broke early this morning." Isaac found himself reluctant to move away from the bed, studying her face anxiously for any sign that the fever might be returning. "How do you feel?" "Weak as a kitten and thoroughly embarrassed," she admitted, a faint blush coloring her pale cheeks. "This was not how I planned our first meeting, Mr. Armstrong. I am so sorry for the trouble." "Isaac, please, and you have nothing to apologize for. I am just grateful you survived the journey." He pulled the chair closer and sat down, suddenly aware of how disheveled he must look after 2 days without shaving or changing his clothes. "What happened, Natalie? Your letters never mentioned that you were ill." She looked away, and he saw shame and something like fear flicker across her features. "I was not ill when I wrote my last letter, but circumstances became desperate very quickly. My landlady demanded the rent I could not pay and gave me 1 week to leave. I had already lost my teaching position because the school board decided it was not appropriate for an unmarried woman of reduced circumstances to teach their precious children." Bitterness crept into her weak voice. "I think they were afraid I might be a moral contaminate since my father died in debt." Isaac felt anger kindle again at the injustice of it, but he kept his voice calm. "So you had nowhere to go, nowhere in Boston." "I had just received your letter with the money for passage, and it seemed like providence. A chance to start fresh somewhere no one knew about my family's scandal. But I had to leave immediately, before my landlady could turn me out into the street. She met his eyes again, and he saw steel beneath the delicacy. I was living on one meal a day for weeks, trying to save enough money to at least arrive here without being completely penniless. I think I caught a chill sleeping in my unheated room, and by the time I boarded the train, I was already feeling poorly. But I could not delay. The ticket was purchased, and I had nowhere else to go. You should have sent word. I would have sent more money, helped you find lodgings until you were well. I did not want you to think I was trying to take advantage of your generosity. We had agreed I would come in September. It was already September, and I was terrified that if I delayed or asked for more money, you might change your mind and decide I was not worth the trouble. She closed her eyes briefly. I gambled that I could make it here and recover once I arrived. Clearly, I nearly lost that gamble. Isaac reached out and took her hand, feeling how small and fragile it was in his calloused palm. You did make it here, and you are going to recover. I will make sure of it, and I want you to understand something, Natalie. I do not change my mind easily, and I wanted you here not because of any obligation, but because your letters made me hope for something I had stopped believing in. She looked at him with such vulnerability that it made his heart ache. What was that? A true partnership. Someone to build a life with, not just share a house with. Your letters were full of intelligence and humor and courage. Those qualities do not disappear just because circumstances became difficult. He squeezed her hand gently. Now, you need to eat something and regain your strength. I make a decent beef broth if you think you can keep it down. A small smile touched her lips, transforming her wan face. I think I could try. And Isaac, thank you for not turning me away. Many men would have sent a sick mail-order bride right back where she came from. I am not many men, Isaac said simply, then rose to prepare food, still holding her hand until the last possible moment before heading to the kitchen. Over the next week, Isaac devoted himself to Natalie's recovery with the same determination he brought to everything in his life. He prepared simple but nourishing meals, starting with broths and gradually progressing to more substantial fare as her appetite returned. He changed her bedding daily, brought her books from his small collection to help pass the time, and spent hours sitting beside her bed, talking about everything and nothing. During those long conversations, Isaac learned details about Natalie that her letters had not revealed. He learned that she had a talent for sketching, and had once dreamed of studying art before practicality, and her family's expectations had pushed her toward teaching. He learned that she had a sweet tooth for peppermint candy and a fear of thunderstorms that dated back to childhood. He learned that she could read Latin and French, played the piano beautifully, and had once been proposed to by a wealthy merchant's son before her family's financial collapse had made her suddenly unmarriageable in Boston society. In turn, he told her about his own past, about growing up on a small farm in Missouri and watching his parents struggle to make ends meet. He told her about the restlessness that had driven him west after his father's death, about the years he had spent working other men's ranches and saving every penny until he could buy land of his own. He told her about the satisfaction of building something with his own hands, of watching cattle thrive on land he had cleared and fenced, of breaking horses that would carry their riders faithfully for years to come. I think I would like to learn to ride, Natalie said one afternoon as she sat propped against the pillows, looking stronger and more alert than she had since arriving. If we are to be married and I am to live on a ranch, I should learn the skills that will make me useful. Isaac smiled at her determination. Once you are fully recovered, I would be happy to teach you. I have a gentle mare that would be perfect for a beginner. Her name is Willow, and she has the patience of a saint. Will you tell me about the ranch, the layout, the animals, what you do each day? I want to understand the life I am entering." So Isaac described it all in detail. The main house where they currently sat, surrounded by the covered porch he had built for shade, and the vegetable garden he tried to maintain with varying success. The barn and stables that housed his horses, including 2 breeding mares and a magnificent stallion named Thunder that he had bought from a Paiute trader 3 years ago. The cattle that grazed on several hundred acres of rangeland moved between pastures according to the season and the quality of the grass. The bunkhouse where his 3 permanent ranch hands lived, along with the cook shack where they prepared their meals. "It sounds wonderful," Natalie said softly. "Like something from a dream." In Boston, I was crammed into a tiny boarding house room with peeling wallpaper and a window that looked out onto a brick wall. I could barely afford coal for heat. This house, this life you have built, it seems impossibly spacious and free. It is spacious, but it is also hard work and sometimes lonely. Winters can be harsh, and there are months where we barely see anyone beyond the ranch hands. Hangtown is not Boston. There are no theaters or concert halls, no libraries or museums. You need to be sure this is truly what you want, Natalie, because once we are married, there is no easy path back to the life you knew. She met his eyes with a directness that had become familiar over the past week. "The life I knew in Boston ended when my father died and his partner stole everything. What came after was just survival, not living. I want this, Isaac. I want the chance to build something new, to be part of something meaningful. Your letters promised me a partnership, and I intend to hold you to that promise." "Then we should discuss practical matters," Isaac said, though part of him wanted to avoid the conversation and just exist in the comfortable intimacy they had developed during her convalescence. "Once you are well enough to travel into town, we should see Reverend Matthews about getting married. I meant what I said about making this proper and legal as soon as possible." Pink colored Natalie's cheeks, but she nodded. "I would like that, though I confess I have no proper dress for a wedding. Everything I owned of value had to be sold in Boston, and what little I brought with me is not suitable for such an occasion." "That does not matter to me. You could wear a flour sack and I would be happy. But if it matters to you, Mrs. Patterson at the general store keeps some ready-made dresses, and there is a seamstress in town who could alter something to fit you properly." "It might be nice to have one pretty thing," Natalie admitted. "Not for you, though you have been so kind. I would like to look nice for our wedding. But for me, to mark the start of this new life with something that belongs to the future rather than the difficult past." Isaac understood that desire more than he could easily express. "Then we will make sure you have a dress that makes you happy, and anything else you need or want within reason. This ranch does well enough that you need not worry about basic necessities or small comforts." "I am not accustomed to depending on anyone," Natalie said quietly. "In Boston, I took pride in supporting myself, even when it was difficult. I would like to contribute here as well, not simply be a burden on your charity." "You will never be a burden, but I understand the need to feel useful. There is plenty you can do once you are recovered. The house could use a woman's touch, and I confess my cooking is adequate but uninspired. The garden could be expanded, and if you still wish to teach, there are children on the surrounding ranches who have little access to proper education. You could do a great deal of good." Her eyes brightened at that suggestion. "I would like that very much." Teaching was the one part of my Boston life I truly enjoyed, when the school board was not interfering. The children were eager to learn, and I loved watching their faces light up when they finally grasped a difficult concept. They talked until the afternoon light began to fade, and Isaac realized with a start that he had neglected his ranch duties for an entire day, too absorbed in conversation to notice the passing hours. He rose reluctantly to check on the animals and confer with Carlos about the work that needed to be done the following day. When he returned an hour later with a supper tray, he found Natalie asleep again, her face peaceful and relaxed in a way it had not been during those first fevered days. Isaac set the tray aside and simply stood there for a long moment, watching her sleep and marveling at how quickly his life had changed. A week ago, he had been a solitary man whose human contact consisted mainly of brief conversations with his ranch hands and occasional trips to town for supplies. Now there was a woman in his bed, a woman who would soon be his wife, and the house felt different somehow. Fuller. More like a home than just a place to eat and sleep between long days of work. The following morning, Natalie insisted on getting out of bed for the first time since the fever broke. Isaac helped her to a chair by the window, where she could look out over the ranch yard and see the mountains in the distance. She was shaky on her feet but determined, and he could see the effort it cost her to maintain her dignity while being so weak. "It is beautiful," she said, gazing out at the landscape painted gold and amber by the morning sun. "The space, the mountains, the sky. I never imagined sky could be so vast. In Boston, you only see little patches of it between the buildings." "Wait until you see the stars at night," Isaac said. "No city lights to dim them. The whole sky becomes a river of light." She smiled at his description, then turned to look at him seriously. "Isaac, I need to ask you something, and I need you to be completely honest with me, always. Do I look the way you expected? From my letters, I mean. I know I must look terrible right now, after being so ill, but even before that, when I was healthy. Was I what you hoped for?" Isaac considered the question carefully, understanding the vulnerability beneath it. "You are lovelier than I imagined, though your photograph did you justice. But that was never what mattered most to me, Natalie. Prettiness fades, and out here, it is not much use against hard winters and harsh summers. What I hoped for was someone with strength and intelligence and heart, someone who could face difficulties without breaking. You traveled 3,000 miles while deathly ill because you had nowhere else to go and no one to help you. You survived that journey through sheer determination. That tells me everything I need to know about your character." Tears welled in her eyes, but she blinked them back. "I was so afraid you would be disappointed, that the reality would not match whatever fantasy you had built from letters and a single photograph." "The reality is better," Isaac said simply. "The woman in the letters had wit and warmth, but I could not hear her voice or see how her eyes light up when she talks about teaching. I could not watch her face her fears with courage or see how she refuses to let weakness defeat her. You are more than I hoped for, Natalie Harper, and I count myself lucky that you were brave enough to take a chance on a stranger." She reached out and took his hand, her grip still weak but steady. "Then I suppose we should make this official, Mr. Armstrong. As soon as I am strong enough to stand before a preacher without fainting, we should marry. Are you certain? We could wait longer, give you time to be sure this is what you want. I would not have you feel pressured or trapped." "I am certain," she said firmly. "I have had a week to observe you, Isaac, to see how you care for someone who has brought you nothing but trouble since arriving, to listen to how you speak about your life and your dreams, to learn your character through actions rather than just written words. You are a good man, and I believe we can build something worthwhile together." Isaac felt something warm and hopeful expand in his chest. "Then I will send word to Reverend Matthews to expect us as soon as you can make the trip to town. It is only 5 miles, but the road is rough. Perhaps another week to regain your strength. I will work hard at recovering. I am motivated now," she said with a small smile, True to her word, Natalie threw herself into regaining her health with impressive determination. She forced herself to eat hearty meals even when her appetite was lacking, walked a little farther around the house each day to rebuild her strength, and spent time in the sun on the porch to regain the color in her cheeks. Isaac supported her efforts while trying not to hover too obviously, though he found himself making excuses to check on her throughout the day. His ranch hands noticed the change in him and teased him mercilessly when he came to the barn or the pastures. Carlos, who had worked for Isaac for 3 years and was the closest thing he had to a friend, was particularly amused by his boss's distraction. "You have checked that fence line 3 times this morning, and it was fine the first time," Carlos observed as they rode the northern boundary of the property. "Your mind is back at the house with your woman. She is still recovering. I worry about leaving her alone too long." "She is doing well. I saw her walking on the porch yesterday and she looked strong. You are not worried about her health anymore, Jeef. You are falling in love." Isaac opened his mouth to deny it, then closed it again. Was he falling in love? He certainly thought about Natalie constantly, looked forward to every meal they shared, every conversation. He liked the sound of her laughter, rare as it still was, and the way she listened intently when he talked about his work. He admired her resilience and her refusal to be defeated by circumstances that would have broken someone with less courage. "Perhaps I am," he admitted. "Though it seems quick," Carlos laughed. "Love does not follow a schedule, my friend. When my Rosa smiled at me at the harvest dance, I knew within an hour that I wanted to marry her. Sometimes the heart knows before the head catches up. Your Rosa was not a stranger who arrived through the mail sick with fever. No, but that makes your woman's courage even more impressive. She bet everything on you being a good man, and she was right. That is worth respecting, even if it had not come with a pretty face and intelligence to match." They finished checking the fence line and returned to the barn, where Isaac saw Natalie sitting on the porch steps, her face turned toward the sun. She had braided her long brown hair, which had regained some of its luster as her health improved, and she wore one of the simple dresses he had retrieved from her trunk and laundered. She looked peaceful and content, and something in Isaac's chest tightened pleasantly at the sight. He dismounted and handed Thunder's reins to one of the other ranch hands, then walked toward the house. Natalie stood as he approached, and he was pleased to see she barely swayed, her legs much steadier than they had been even 2 days ago. "You have been working hard this morning," she observed. "I saw you and Carlos ride out before dawn, checking the northern fence line. Cattle have a talent for finding any weakness and exploiting it." He climbed the steps to stand beside her, very aware of her nearness. "You are looking stronger every day." "I feel stronger. Strong enough, I think, to make that trip to town you mentioned. If you are still willing, I would like to see about getting married soon." Isaac felt something warm flood through him. "I am very willing. We could go tomorrow if you feel up to it. The road is rough, but I can pad the wagon bed to make it more comfortable." "Tomorrow would be perfect," Natalie said, then added with a shy smile, "I have been practicing walking and building my stamina specifically for this. I did not want to delay any longer." "Why the hurry?" Isaac asked gently. "I am not going anywhere, and neither are you." She looked away, and he saw color rise in her cheeks. "Because every day that passes, I feel more like I am living under false pretenses. You have been so proper and kind, giving me your bed while you sleep in the spare room, but people in town will talk. And because every day I spend with you, I become more certain that I made the right choice in coming here. I want to make it official. I want to truly be your wife, not just a mail-order bride who fell ill and overstayed her welcome." Isaac reached out and gently turned her face back toward him. "You could never overstay your welcome. This is your home now, for as long as you want it to be. But I understand what you mean about making it official. I want that too. So tomorrow we will go to town, see Reverend Matthews, and if you are agreeable, we will marry as soon as he can arrange it." "I am very agreeable," Natalie said softly, and the look in her blue eyes made Isaac's heart race in a way that had nothing to do with hard work or exertion. They went to town the following day, Isaac driving carefully to avoid the worst bumps while Natalie sat beside him on the wagon seat, dressed in her best remaining dress and looking nervous but determined. The 5-mile journey took almost an hour at the slow pace Isaac maintained, and by the time they rolled into Hangtown's Main Street, Natalie was gripping the seat with white knuckles, but holding herself upright with impressive determination. The town had not changed much in the week since Natalie's dramatic arrival. The same dusty street, the same collection of rough buildings housing the general store, saloon, blacksmith, and other essential businesses. A few new faces, some familiar ones, and the general air of a place that had seen better days but refused to completely die. Isaac helped Natalie down from the wagon and was gratified to see she needed only minimal support. They walked together toward the small church at the end of the street, a modest wooden building with a simple cross on its steeple. Reverend Matthews was in his garden behind the church, tending to vegetables with the same earnest dedication he brought to his sermons. "Isaac Armstrong," the Reverend called out, wiping his hands on his trousers as he approached. "I heard through the town gossip that your mail-order bride had arrived, though I also heard she arrived gravely ill. I trust this is the lady in question, now recovered." "This is Natalie Harper," Isaac introduced her. "And yes, she arrived with a severe fever but has recovered well. We have come to ask if you would marry us, Reverend." The elderly minister looked between them with shrewd but kind eyes. "I assume you wish this to happen quickly." "To silence the wagging tongues about an unmarried woman staying at your ranch. I wish it to happen quickly because I want Natalie to be my wife in truth, not just in name," Isaac said firmly. "The gossip is secondary." Reverend Matthews nodded approvingly. "Good answer, young man." "And you, Miss Harper, are you entering this marriage of your own free will without pressure or coercion? I need to be certain, given the unusual circumstances." Natalie met his gaze directly. "I am, Reverend. Isaac has been nothing but kind and honorable. I chose to come here based on our correspondence, and I choose now to marry him based on the character he has shown me since my arrival. Then I would be honored to perform the ceremony." "When would you like this to occur?" "As soon as possible," Isaac said. "Tomorrow, if that can be arranged." "Tomorrow is the Sabbath. Come to the church after the regular service and we will make it official. You will need witnesses. You have anyone in mind?" "My ranch hands can serve as witnesses," Isaac replied. "They are good men and have known me for years." "Excellent. Then I will see you both tomorrow afternoon. Miss Harper, might I suggest you visit Mrs. Patterson at the general store? She mentioned having some suitable dresses, and I believe every bride deserves to feel special on her wedding day, regardless of the circumstances." They thanked the Reverend and made their way to the general store, where Mrs. Patterson greeted them with barely concealed curiosity and what might have been approval. "So the sick bride lives," she said, looking Natalie up and down with a critical eye. "You are looking much better than when you arrived, dear. Isaac must have taken good care of you." "He saved my life," Natalie said simply. "And now we are here to arrange a wedding. Reverend Matthews mentioned you might have a suitable dress." Mrs. Patterson's demeanor softened considerably. "I do indeed. Come with me to the back, and we will see what we can find." Isaac wandered the store while the women disappeared into the back room, examining supplies and making a mental list of things the ranch needed. He was studying a display of new tools when he heard Mrs. Patterson exclaim with satisfaction. And a few minutes later, Natalie emerged wearing a dress of deep blue that brought out the color of her eyes. The dress was simple but well made, with modest lace trim at the collar and cuffs. It fit her reasonably well, though it hung a bit loose in places where she had not yet regained the weight lost during her illness. But Natalie's face was glowing with pleasure, and Isaac found himself momentarily speechless. "You look beautiful," he finally managed. "Mrs. Patterson says she can take in the waist and hem it properly if I leave it with her today. I could pick it up tomorrow morning before the ceremony." Natalie looked uncertain. "But Isaac, I have no money to pay for it. I could not possibly accept this as charity." "It is not charity," Isaac said firmly. "It is a wedding gift from me to my bride. Mrs. Patterson, whatever the cost, please put it on my account and do whatever alterations are needed. And while you are at it, add 3 more everyday dresses suitable for ranch life, in colors and styles that Natalie chooses." "Isaac, that is too much," Natalie protested, but he could see the longing in her eyes as she looked at the other dresses displayed around the store. "It is necessary. You need clothes suitable for your new life, and I want you to have them. Please, let me do this for you. You came here with almost nothing, and I want you to feel like this is truly your home." Natalie's eyes filled with tears, but she was smiling. "Thank you. You have no idea what it means to not have to worry about every penny, to be able to accept kindness without shame." Mrs. Patterson dabbed at her own eyes with her apron. "You have a good man there, dear. Treat him well, and I think you will be very happy together." They spent another hour in the store, with Natalie selecting practical dresses in sturdy fabrics, along with some necessary undergarments and a warm shawl for the coming winter. Isaac also insisted on purchasing a new hat to replace the battered one she had arrived in, and a pair of sturdy boots suitable for ranch work. By the time they finished, Natalie looked slightly overwhelmed by his generosity, but also touchingly pleased. They stopped at the small restaurant on the main street for a meal before heading back to the ranch. It was the first time they had been out in public together as a couple, and Isaac was acutely aware of the stares and whispers from other diners. Hangtown was a small place where everyone knew everyone else's business, and the story of the mail-order bride who arrived sick with fever had clearly spread throughout the community. "Let them stare," Isaac said quietly as they waited for their food. "By this time tomorrow, you will be my wife and they can gossip about something else. Does it bother you? The talk, the attention?" "Not particularly. I have never cared much what people think as long as I know I am acting with honor. And there is nothing dishonorable about marrying a woman I've come to deeply respect and care for." Natalie reached across the table and took his hand, a gesture that felt both bold and natural. "I care for you too, Isaac, more than I expected to in such a short time. You have given me so much more than just a home. You have given me hope and dignity and the chance to start again without shame." Their food arrived, interrupting the moment, but Isaac held onto her hand for a few seconds longer before releasing it. They ate in comfortable silence, the kind that comes from growing familiar with each other's presence, then made the journey back to the ranch as the afternoon sun began its descent toward the mountains. That evening, as they sat on the porch watching the sunset paint the sky in shades of orange and purple, Isaac felt a contentment he had not experienced in years. Tomorrow, Natalie would become his wife. Tomorrow, the careful structure of his solitary life would change forever. And instead of feeling apprehensive, he felt only anticipation and a deep certainty that this was exactly right. "Thank you for taking a chance on me," Natalie said softly as the first stars began to appear in the darkening sky. "For not sending me back to Boston when I arrived sick and useless." "You were never useless," Isaac replied, "and I would never have sent you back. From the moment I read your first letter, I felt something shift inside me. Hope, maybe, or possibility. The sense that life could be more than just work and survival. You gave me that, Natalie, long before you arrived here." She leaned against his shoulder, and he wrapped an arm around her, holding her close as the sky filled with that river of stars he had promised her. They sat there until the night grew cold, then went inside to their separate rooms, but Isaac felt the connection between them strengthening with each passing hour, each shared moment. The following day dawned clear and beautiful, with a crispness in the air that promised autumn was truly arriving. Isaac rose early and completed his essential chores, then bathed and dressed in his best clothes, a suit he had not worn since a friend's wedding 2 years ago. He polished his boots until they shone, and even attempted to tame his unruly brown hair with water and determination. Carlos and the other ranch hands cleaned up as well, clearly taking their roles as witnesses seriously. They ribbed Isaac good-naturedly as they all climbed into the wagon for the trip to town, but there was genuine happiness in their teasing. They had been worried about their boss spending his life alone, and they approved of the brave woman who had traveled so far to become his wife. They arrived in town to find Natalie already at the church, having gotten a ride with a neighboring rancher's family who had come for the Sunday service. Isaac's breath caught when he saw her standing on the church steps in her new blue dress, her hair arranged in soft curls and her face glowing with a combination of nervousness and joy. "You are the most beautiful thing I have ever seen," he said as he approached, and was rewarded with a blush and a brilliant smile. "You clean up rather well yourself, Mr. Armstrong." "Soon to be Mrs. Armstrong," he replied, offering his arm. The ceremony was simple but meaningful. Reverend Matthews spoke about commitment and partnership, about building a life together through all the challenges and joys that would come. Isaac made his vows with a steady voice, promising to honor and cherish Natalie, to provide for her and protect her, to be faithful and true through whatever life brought them. Natalie's voice wavered slightly as she made her own promises, but her eyes never left his, and the sincerity in her words was unmistakable. When Reverend Matthews pronounced them husband and wife, Isaac leaned down to kiss his new bride gently, respectfully, conscious of their audience. But even that chaste kiss sent warmth flooding through him, and when Natalie smiled up at him, he saw his own emotions reflected in her eyes. They signed the marriage certificate with Carlos and the other hands serving as witnesses, making it official in the eyes of both law and church. A small crowd had gathered outside the church, curious townspeople who wanted to see the mail-order bride who had survived fever and won Isaac Armstrong's heart. Isaac felt Natalie tense beside him as they emerged into the afternoon sunshine, facing the stares and whispers. "Mrs. Armstrong," he said clearly, loud enough for everyone to hear, "may I drive my wife home now?" The use of her new name seemed to give Natalie confidence. She straightened her shoulders and smiled at the crowd with genuine warmth. "Yes, please. I am eager to begin our life together." They rode back to the ranch in the wagon, with Carlos and the hands riding their horses alongside. The other men peeled off toward the bunkhouse when they arrived, leaving Isaac and Natalie alone in front of the main house. For the first time, there was a hint of awkwardness between them, both suddenly aware that everything had changed. "I should carry you over the threshold," Isaac said. "It is traditional." "I weigh more than when I arrived," Natalie warned, but she was smiling as he lifted her easily and carried her through the door into what was now their shared home. He set her down gently in the main room, and they stood there for a moment, just looking at each other. Then Natalie laughed, a sound of pure joy and relief, and the awkwardness dissolved. "We did it. We are actually married." "We are," Isaac agreed, pulling her close. "Mrs. Natalie Armstrong, it suits you." "I think it does," she said, then rose on her toes to kiss him properly, without an audience or the constraints of propriety. Isaac responded with an eagerness he had kept carefully controlled throughout the past 2 weeks, and when they finally broke apart, both were breathless. "I should prepare us some dinner," Natalie said, though she made no move to step away from his embrace. "Later," Isaac replied. "Right now, I just want to hold my wife and marvel at how lucky I am." They spent the rest of the afternoon, an evening getting to know each other in new ways, talking and laughing and building the foundation of their married life. Isaac showed Natalie the ranch ledgers and explained the business side of running the property, treating her as the partner she had wanted to be. She offered thoughtful suggestions and asked intelligent questions, her teacher's mind quick to grasp the essentials of ranch management. As night fell, they moved to the bedroom they would now share, and Isaac was careful to let Natalie set the pace, mindful that she was still recovering her strength and that their relationship, though deep in some ways, was still new in others. But Natalie proved to have courage in this arena as well, and their wedding night was tender and sweet, full of discovery and growing intimacy. In the days and weeks that followed, Isaac and Natalie settled into married life with surprising ease. Natalie threw herself into making the ranch house a true home, adding touches of comfort and beauty that had been missing from Isaac's bachelor existence. She planted flowers around the porch, arranged the kitchen for maximum efficiency, and even convinced him to build some bookshelves for the small collection of books they had begun to accumulate. True to her desire to be useful, Natalie also took over much of the cooking, which the ranch hands appreciated greatly after years of Isaac's uninspired meals. She experimented with recipes, using the supplies available and occasionally sending Isaac to town for special ingredients when she wanted to try something new. The house began to smell of fresh bread and herbs, of stews simmering on the stove and pies cooling on the windowsill. But what pleased Isaac most was seeing Natalie thrive in ways that went beyond domestic contributions. She began riding lessons with Willow, the gentle mare, and proved to be a natural horsewoman despite her initial nervousness. Within a month, she was confident enough to ride out with him to check the cattle, sitting tall in the saddle and laughing at the wind in her hair. The freedom of the open range seemed to heal something in her that had been damaged by her time of poverty and desperation in Boston. She also began offering lessons to the children of neighboring ranchers, just as Isaac had suggested. Word spread quickly that the new Mrs. Armstrong was an educated woman willing to teach, and soon Natalie had a small school meeting 3 days a week in the ranch house dining room. The children adored her patient teaching style, and their parents were grateful for the opportunity to have their children educated without sending them away to distant schools. As autumn deepened into winter, Isaac found himself falling more deeply in love with his wife with each passing day. It was not just her beauty, though he never tired of watching her move through the house or seeing her face light up with laughter. It was her strength, her intelligence, her determination to build a good life from the ashes of her difficult past. It was the way she cared for the ranch animals with genuine affection, the way she listened to his concerns and offered thoughtful advice, the way she made their house feel like a home in ways he had not imagined possible. One evening in early December, as they sat before the fire after dinner, Natalie looked up from the book she was reading and studied him with a thoughtful expression. "What is it?" Isaac asked, setting aside the leather strap he had been mending. "I was just thinking about how different my life is now compared to a year ago. Last December, I was cold and hungry and frightened, wondering how I would survive the winter in Boston. And now, I am warm and well-fed and safe, married to a man I love, in a place that feels like home. It seems impossible that so much could change so quickly." Isaac moved to sit beside her on the sofa they had purchased on a trip to the larger town of Sacramento. "You love me." It was the first time either of them had said the words aloud, though Isaac had felt it for weeks. "I do," Natalie said softly. "I think I started falling in love with you when you were nursing me through that fever, though I was too ill to fully understand it then. But definitely by our wedding day, I knew. And every day since has only made me more certain. You are the best man I have ever known, Isaac Armstrong." "I love you too," Isaac replied, pulling her close. "I think I started falling in love with your letters, with the woman who could find humor in hardship and hope in difficult circumstances. Meeting you in person only confirmed what I already suspected, that you were exactly what I had been waiting for without knowing it." Natalie kissed him thoroughly, then settled against his chest with a contented sigh. "I want to give you children, Isaac. A family to fill this house and carry on what you have built here. Do you want that too? More than I can say. Though I want you to be fully recovered and strong first. There is no rush. We have our whole lives ahead of us. I am strong now. Stronger than I have been in years, thanks to good food and fresh air and happiness. I am ready to build our family whenever it happens." Isaac held her close, feeling grateful beyond measure for the sick, desperate woman who had arrived on that stagecoach 4 months ago. She had been a risk, an unknown quantity, but she had become the center of his world, the heart of his home, and the love of his life. Spring came to the ranch with an explosion of wildflowers and new calves, and with it came the confirmation that Natalie was pregnant. She told Isaac one evening in April as they stood on the porch watching the sunset, her hand resting on her still flat stomach and her face glowing with joy and a touch of nervousness. "A baby," Isaac breathed, pulling her into his arms with careful gentleness. "We are going to have a baby. Are you happy? I know we have only been married 6 months and perhaps it is too soon." "It is perfect timing," Isaac assured her, "and I am more than happy. I am overjoyed. You have already given me so much, Natalie, and now this. I feel like the luckiest man alive." The pregnancy progressed smoothly, with Natalie blooming under Isaac's attentive care and the healthy ranch lifestyle. She continued teaching as long as she was able, only stopping when the children's mothers insisted she needed to rest more. The ranch hands treated her with almost comical protectiveness, rushing to help with any task that seemed too strenuous, and bringing her small gifts from town special foods she was craving. Yarn for knitting baby clothes, a rocking chair that Carlos built himself in the barn. In November, as the first snow of winter began to fall, Natalie went into labor. Isaac sent Carlos racing to town for the midwife, then stayed by his wife's side through the long hours of labor, holding her hand and offering what comfort he could. Mrs. Patterson, who had become a friend to Natalie over the past year, arrived with the midwife and took charge of the situation with calm efficiency. "You are doing beautifully, dear," she encouraged Natalie during a particularly difficult contraction. "Just a bit more, and you will be holding your baby." Isaac had faced down charging cattle and broken wild horses, had survived harsh winters and droughts and all the challenges that came with ranch life, but nothing had prepared him for the fear and helplessness of watching his wife in pain. When the baby's first cry finally split the air, he felt tears running down his own face, relief and joy overwhelming him. "It is a boy," the midwife announced, wrapping the squalling infant in clean blankets. A healthy, strong boy with good lungs. She placed the baby in Natalie's arms, and Isaac moved to sit beside them on the bed, staring in wonder at the tiny person they had created. The baby had a shock of dark hair like his father and his mother's delicate features, and when he opened his eyes, they were a deep blue that might change or might stay. "Hello, little one," Natalie whispered, her voice thick with emotion. "Welcome to the world." "He is perfect," Isaac said, touching one tiny fist with a careful finger. "You are perfect. Thank you, Natalie. Thank you for this incredible gift." They named him James Harrison Armstrong, honoring both their fathers, and he became the center of their world. Isaac proved to be a devoted father, rising in the night to walk with the baby when he fussed, changing diapers without complaint, and spending every spare moment holding his son and marveling at every tiny expression. The ranch continued to prosper, and with Natalie's help, Isaac expanded his horse breeding operation. She had a good eye for quality and helped him select breeding stock that improved their reputation throughout California. They became known for producing reliable, well-trained horses, and buyers came from as far as San Francisco to purchase Armstrong Ranch stock. Life settled into a rhythm of work and family, of challenges met and overcome together. James grew from a baby into a curious toddler, then an energetic boy who loved helping his father with the ranch animals. When he was 3, Natalie gave birth to a daughter, whom they named Sarah Grace, and 2 years after that, another son they called Thomas. The house that had once been too large for one lonely man was now filled with the sounds of children laughing and playing, of Natalie singing while she worked, of family dinners around the expanded table that Isaac had built to accommodate their growing family. The ranch hands had become like uncles to the children, teaching them to ride and rope, telling them stories and spoiling them with small gifts. On their 5th wedding anniversary, Isaac and Natalie stood on the porch after putting the children to bed, looking out over the ranch that had become a true home. The mountains stood silhouetted against the star-filled sky, and the cool September air carried the scent of hay and horses, and the wildflowers that still bloomed in Natalie's carefully tended garden. "You ever regret it?" Isaac asked, pulling his wife close. "Leaving Boston, taking such a huge risk on a stranger." Natalie turned in his arms to face him, her eyes reflecting the lamplight from inside the house. "Not for a single moment. That feverish journey on the stagecoach brought me to exactly where I was meant to be. With you, with our children, building this life together. Everything I suffered before was worth it to arrive here." "I think about that day sometimes," Isaac admitted. "How close I came to losing you before I even had a chance to know you. If your fever had been any worse, if you had waited even one more day to travel. But I did not die, and I did arrive, and you saved me. Not just from the fever, Isaac, but from a life of loneliness and desperation. You gave me hope when I had none, dignity when I felt I had lost it, and a love I never dreamed I could have. You are my hero, my partner, and the love of my life." Isaac kissed her deeply, still feeling that spark of passion and connection that had only grown stronger over the years. "And you are mine. Everything good in my life started the day you arrived on that stagecoach, sick and frightened but so brave. I love you, Natalie Armstrong. I loved you then, I love you now, and I will love you for the rest of our lives." They stood there wrapped in each other's arms as the stars wheeled overhead, two people who had found each other against impossible odds and built something beautiful together. The ranch would continue to grow and prosper. Their children would grow up strong and happy, eventually building their own lives while carrying forward the values their parents had instilled. And through all the years to come, through challenges and joys, sorrows and celebrations. Isaac and Natalie would face it all together, their love the foundation upon which everything else was built. Inside the house, young James stirred in his sleep and called out for his mother. Natalie smiled and squeezed Isaac's hand before heading inside to comfort their son. Isaac followed her, closing the door on the cool night air and stepping into the warmth and light of the home they had created. This was what happiness looked like, he thought as he watched Natalie soothe James back to sleep with a soft lullaby. This was what all his years of hard work and loneliness had been leading toward. The years continued to unfold with their mixture of joy and hardship, triumph and struggle, but through it all, the love between Isaac and Natalie remained constant and true. They weathered droughts that tested the ranch's resources, celebrated bumper years when the cattle and horses thrived beyond expectation. They nursed their children through illnesses, taught them to read and write and ride, and watched with pride as they grew into capable, kind individuals. When James was 10, he announced that he wanted to be a rancher just like his father. Sarah, at 7, declared she would be a teacher like their mother had been. Thomas, at 5, changed his mind about his future profession almost daily, but showed a particular talent with animals that suggested he might follow in his brother's footsteps. Natalie expanded her teaching operation, eventually convincing Isaac to build a proper schoolhouse on a corner of their property. Children from ranches within a 10-mile radius attended, and Natalie hired a young woman from Sacramento to help with the younger students. Education became another source of pride for the Armstrong Ranch, and Natalie's reputation as an excellent teacher spread throughout the region. Isaac continued to build on his initial success, eventually owning one of the most respected ranches in that part of California. But he never forgot where he had started, and he never took for granted the woman who had arrived sick and desperate and become his everything. He made sure to tell Natalie he loved her every single day, to show her through actions large and small that she was cherished and valued. On their 10th anniversary, Isaac arranged for Carlos to watch the children and took Natalie on a trip to San Francisco, something they had talked about for years, but never managed to accomplish. They stayed in a fine hotel, ate in elegant restaurants, and attended the theater, all the cultural experiences Natalie had missed during her years on the ranch. But what she treasured most was simply the time alone with her husband, the chance to remember what had brought them together and to celebrate the life they had built. "I love our children and the ranch," Natalie said as they walked along the waterfront one evening, watching the ships in the harbor. "But it is wonderful to just be Isaac and Natalie for a few days, not Mama and Papa." "Agreed," Isaac replied, pulling her close despite the stares from more proper passers-by who felt such public affection was unseemly. "Though I confess I miss the children already. Is that foolish? Not at all. It means you are a good father, which I already knew." Natalie leaned her head on his shoulder. "We have been blessed beyond measure, Isaac. Sometimes I still cannot believe this is my life, that I get to wake up every morning next to you and spend my days doing meaningful work with people I love." "The blessing is entirely mine," Isaac insisted. "You took a tremendous risk coming here, and you have given me a life richer than I ever imagined possible. Everything good in my world exists because you were brave enough to board that stagecoach despite being so ill." They returned to the ranch renewed and refreshed, ready to dive back into the busy life of ranching and raising children. The years continued to pass, marked by the rhythms of the seasons and the milestones of their growing family. James fell in love with the daughter of a neighboring rancher, and married her in a ceremony that filled the Armstrong house with joy and celebration. Sarah pursued her dream of teaching and eventually took over the school from her mother, allowing Natalie to focus more on her own children and the ranch. Thomas proved to have his father's gift with horses and became Isaac's right-hand man in the breeding operation. He married a woman from Sacramento who had come west to visit relatives and fallen in love with both Thomas and the ranch lifestyle. Soon there were grandchildren toddling around the house, and Isaac and Natalie found themselves in the role of doting grandparents. Through it all, through the joys of weddings and births, through the sorrows of loss when Carlos passed away after a riding accident, and when Mrs. Patterson died peacefully in her sleep at the age of 82, Isaac and Natalie remained each other's greatest support and deepest love. They had built not just a successful ranch but a legacy of hard work, integrity, and devotion to family. As they approached their 20th anniversary, Isaac arranged another surprise for his wife. He had purchased land adjoining their ranch, expanding their holdings significantly, and he had built a new house on a hill overlooking the valley where their cattle grazed and their horses ran. It was larger and more elegant than their original home, with modern conveniences that had not existed when Natalie first arrived. But before they moved in, he insisted on carrying her over the threshold once more, just as he had on their wedding day 2 decades before. "You do realize I am 42 years old and significantly heavier than I was at 22, Natalie protested, laughing as Isaac swept her up into his arms. "You are still the most beautiful woman I have ever seen, and you weigh nothing at all," Isaac declared, carrying her through the door and into the spacious entry hall. "Welcome home, Mrs. Armstrong, again." Natalie kissed him soundly, her arms wrapped around his neck. "I love you, Isaac Armstrong. 20 years, 3 children, countless challenges, and my love for you has only grown deeper with every passing day. You are still my hero, still the best decision I ever made. And you are still the answer to prayers. I did not even know I was praying," Isaac replied, setting her down gently but keeping her close. "When that stagecoach arrived and you could barely stand, I had no idea I was being given the greatest gift of my life. Thank you for taking that risk, for coming here, for building this life with me." They stood there in their new house, older and weathered by life but with love undiminished, and Isaac thought back to that desperate woman burning with fever and the lonely rancher who had nursed her back to health. He thought about how fear and need had brought them together, but how love and partnership had kept them together through everything that followed. The house would be filled with family for their anniversary celebration the following week. Their children and grandchildren would gather to honor the love that had created them all, to celebrate the courage and commitment that had built something lasting from unpromising beginnings. But for now, it was just Isaac and Natalie, as it had been on their wedding night, as it would be until their final days. "Come," Natalie said, taking his hand and leading him toward the stairs. "Show me the rest of our new home. I want to see everything." Isaac followed his wife through the house he had built for her, pointing out features and improvements, listening to her exclamations of delight and suggestions for furnishings. And as the afternoon light streamed through the large windows, painting everything in gold, he felt the same contentment he had felt on that first evening after their wedding, the same certainty that his life had taken the turn it was always meant to take. The mail-order bride who had arrived sick with fever had become the center of his universe, the heart of his home, and the love of his life. Their story, which had begun with desperation and illness, had transformed into a testament to the power of courage, kindness, and committed love. And as they planned their future together in this new house on the hill, with their family around them and years of shared history behind them, Isaac knew with absolute certainty that he would do it all again in a heartbeat. every moment of worry during those first terrible days of nursing her through fever, every challenge they had faced together, every sacrifice and struggle and moment of doubt. All of it had been worth it to arrive at this place, this life, this love that had sustained them through everything and would carry them through whatever years remained. As the sun set over the ranch that had become their kingdom, Isaac and Natalie stood on the porch of their new home, arms wrapped around each other, watching the last light fade from the sky and the first stars emerge. They had built something beautiful together, something that would outlast them in the children they had raised and the legacy they would leave behind. And it had all started with a sick woman on a stagecoach, a lonely rancher with a kind heart, and the courage to take a chance on love when all the odds seemed stacked against them. That was their story, their truth, and the foundation on which they had built a lifetime of happiness. The future stretched before them, filled with more grandchildren to spoil, more seasons to weather together, more quiet evenings watching the stars and remembering how far they had come. And through it all, Isaac and Natalie would walk hand in hand, partners in every sense, bound together by a love that had been tested and proven true time and time again. This was their happily ever after, earned through courage and commitment, built on a foundation of mutual respect and deepening affection. From that first desperate meeting in Hangtown to this peaceful evening in their new home, from fevered helplessness to strength and partnership, they had traveled a remarkable journey together. And as they turned to go inside to begin the next chapter of their shared life, both knew with certainty that they were exactly where they belonged, with exactly the person they were meant to be with, living exactly the life they had dreamed of during those early days of letters and hope, and taking a chance on a stranger. The door closed behind them, shutting out the cool night air, and the lights in the windows glowed warm and welcoming against the darkness. Inside, Isaac and Natalie began their evening routine in their new home, comfortable with each other in the way only 20 years of marriage can bring, still in love in the way that only true partnership and genuine affection can sustain. Their love story, which had begun with such unpromising circumstances, had become the stuff of local legend, whispered about with admiration, and used as an example of faith rewarded and courage vindicated. But for Isaac and Natalie, it was simply their life, the ordinary miracle of two people finding each other against all odds and building something extraordinary together. And as they settled into their new home, ready to face whatever the future held, they did so with the confidence of people who had already weathered the worst and emerged stronger, whose love had been tested and had proven unbreakable, whose commitment to each other remained as strong as it had been on that wedding day 20 years ago when a mail-order bride and a rancher had promised to love and honor each other for all their days. Those promises had been kept, would continue to be kept, and the life they had built together stood as testament to what was possible when courage met kindness, when desperation found compassion, and when two lonely hearts recognized in each other the partner they had been seeking all along.